Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Tonight, I'm joined by my friend, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, Dee Pierce.
Yes, happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Dee. I'm happy to have you here after some technical difficulties.
Yes.
We have a few days. I see we have some folks who have arrived now. No one has announced, however, yet, but we do have some folks, most likely on Twitter. So, uh, our topics for tonight are: can we avoid war with Iran? And can Trump get foreign policy victories? So, two interesting topics, I think.
Yeah, so we need to share. If everybody could share,
Yes,
that would
that's
be
a good
great.
idea. I need to share on Facebook myself. So, let me do that.
Oh, hello, Steve Wolfbrandt is here. That's good.
That's very good.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve. How are you? Okay, so let's get started with the first of our pieces. I handled it, I think, last stream actually, but I wanted to do it again because I just wanted to highlight certain things about it. It gives us the latest views on the general situation of Colonel McGregor, Doug McGregor. And the name of the piece is Iran, and then it flatly states America's next war of choice. Published this in the American Conservative. It's a short piece, but it's a very good statement of his views. The tagline is: the U.S. is at risk of being buffaloed into a bloody war of regional realignment in the wake of Syria's collapse. By Douglas McGregor and James W. Carden, who's a collaborator of Doug's. It was originally written on December 17th, 2024. So it starts off: peace is not at hand in the Middle East, and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu remains determined to expand the war. Syria's de facto partition into Israeli and Turkish territories is the prelude to wider war with Iran. I think that's really a good observation because that seems to be the way that it's shaping up. Iran, of course, had certain interests, okay, in Syria. It wanted a friendly regime there so it could ship its weapons and other goods into Lebanon to Hezbollah, because, of course, it was supporting Hezbollah there very strongly. Uh, so it's basically been cut off, and I think not completely cut off, but the safe passage it uh, 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 has been cut off, and that's because of the partitioning of Syria, which is taking place, okay, right now. Uh, the Israeli armed forces are active in Syria now, in the southern part of Syria. But other parts of Syria are controlled by a motley number of groups but the new government, or supposed government, okay, of Syria, is a Turkish protectorate. The jihadis who took over the government there were supported and sponsored by Turkey mostly, but to a degree by the CIA uh, as well. And of course, the CIA is very, very supportive of the Israeli activities there as well. So both of these forces are in opposition to the interests of Iran. And Iran, I think, for a few weeks now, has been planning what to do. I should mention also the Russians are interested in keeping their bases, in the area, and they're dickering with the Turks and the jihadis uh, so that they can stay there, on a permanent basis. So to continue, Doug and his collaborators say, as the Times of Israel reported last week, the Israeli Air Force, the IAF, has, quote, continued to increase its readiness and preparations, unquote, for, quote, again, potential strikes in Iran. Now, to comment on that, I dare say that the Iranians are fully aware of that, and they, in their turn, are talking about or thinking about planning potential strikes inside of Israel. They never conducted True Promise 3, and I think that's in the back of their mind there. Now, there's obviously been a political struggle, okay, inside of Iran. And when we get into a video with Scott Ritter and Nima in just a while, he'll talk about the internal situation there politically. Okay, but anyway, there are essentially two groups struggling to control the policy at this point. There are the conservatives and the IRGC that are thirsting to attack Israel in True Promise 3. Okay, and then there's a moderate group that would like to strike a deal with Donald Trump, and that has been in favor of Iran holding its fire until Trump comes into office, okay, and the negotiation occurs. In previous streams, I've expressed the opinion that simply waiting is not good for Iran. That what Iran should be doing in True Promise 3 is to destroy the air power, okay, of Israel. Both because that will totally change the situation in Israel itself, and because it will probably result in chasing the Israeli forces out of Syria as well, because without air protection, they're going to want to get home fast. And especially if the Iranians follow up an air attack with a substantial attack by the IRGC itself inside of Syria. Going on with the article, though, Netanyahu's top priority is the destruction of Iran before Russia wraps up its victory in Ukraine and Syria becomes a new battleground for Turks, okay, and Israelis. Okay, now, I think this is a very interesting view of the situation you haven't been hearing from too many people, except for Doug. Now, I take it he's sort of stating this Israeli view because he's got some contacts, okay, inside of Israel, and he thinks that the Israelis are thinking this way, that they're thinking there's going to be a battleground in Syria between themselves and the Turks, or there may be one anyway, and they want to get Iran out of the way before that starts. Going on with the article, it's not simply the end of Washington's rules based international order, quote unquote, it's the onset of chaos. Israeli forces and Turkish uh, uh, auxiliaries, i.e., the Islamist terrorists who sacked Syria, are already staring at each other across a demarcation line that runs east west just south of Damascus. By the way, D, if you want to comment on any of this, feel free. Uh, that's a true statement. The Israelis and the auxiliaries, the Turkish auxiliaries, interesting phrase that for them, uh, are staring at each other. Netanyahu harbors no illusions about the conflict between Ankara's long-term strategic aims in the region and Jerusalem's determination to claim the Syrian spoils, okay, of war. In addition to serious financial trouble and societal discontent on the home front, President-elect Donald Trump now confronts the dangerous distraction of wars he did not start, wars that will bring his administration and his country no strategic benefit. The U.S.'s underwriting of Netanyahu's expanding war in the Middle East will endanger U.S. national security and guarantee that Washington, its armed forces, and the U.S. economy will be hostage to whatever strategic direction Netanyahu decides to take. It's another interesting observation. It's probably a true one because if Washington is embroiled in a long war in the Middle East with Iran in support, okay, of Israel, then the focus of attention in Washington is going to be on that particular war. And lots of things that Trump has in mind to do domestically at home are going to have to take a back seat to that particular war, and also a back seat to trying to keep us out of a nuclear conflict, because I don't think that Trump wants any part of that. Going on with the article, starting the war sooner rather than later is critical for Netanyahu. War with Iran presents Trump with a strategic fait accompli. In case Trump decides to distance the United States from another bloodbath in the Middle East, Israel's ongoing conflict with Iran and Turkey's potential confrontation with Israel will make disengagement impossible. I think that comment is a very sagacious one. I think it's true. Okay. Also, it will be hard for us to disengage if Iran and Turkey are having a potential confrontation, okay, with Israel, because Israel, of course, is our very close ally, or so we consider it, or so our donors will have it. Okay, Turkey is still formally an ally, inside of NATO. Well, mostly they go their own way these days, but still technically they're part, of NATO, and we have certain interests, in common with them. For example, the interest of making Syria unstable. We were trying to overthrow Assad, the Americans were, but for decades. And Turkey had the same interest. And we collaborated with them in supporting the jihadis to overthrow the Assad regime. So we had that in common. Uh, and we have other interests in common too. But Turkey wants to be a hub for shipping oil up into Europe. We probably have an interest in making that happen. Or maybe we have an interest in blocking it. It's not very clear. After all, we didn't particularly like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, or the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines. So maybe we won't like a pipeline going from Turkey into Europe either. But I think we're pulled in two different ways there. I think we see dangerous things are happening to the economies of Europe. And some people here in America don't think this is a good thing because it weakens the Europeans as allies of the United States. So probably we're pulled basically two ways on this. But the point here is, I think that uh, the idea that Israel's ongoing conflict with Iran and Turkey's potential confrontation with Israel, that will make our disengagement impossible. That is a very important comment from the standpoint of the likely fate of the Trump administration. So going on, American policy planners need to understand the larger context in which this is all unfolding and why a war on Iran will ultimately bring us and our alleged Israeli friends to grief. Yes, our alleged Israeli friends by reasons of the donors. The principal aim of U.S. foreign policy planners ought to be the adaptation of the American economy and military establishment to the multipolar world, and the development of new markets, not but new enemies. So this statement is very central to the thinking of Colonel McGregor. He wants us to adapt to the multipolar world because he sees us as not having the power to maintain hegemony of the United States. And he thinks our attempts to do so are ruining our foreign policy and creating all sorts of domestic problems for us also. He and I agree on that. And also Scott Ritter, whose views we'll see in just a few minutes, of course, also agrees with that very, very strongly. Going on with the article, though, Washington's refusal to acknowledge the fundamental shifts in power and wealth lie at the heart of much of the Biden administration's foreign policy failure. And you know from previous streams of my views that Biden has been just about the worst foreign policy president that we have ever had. because for the first time in 40 years, he has exposed us to the risk, okay, of a nuclear war. And that has happened because of Biden's refusal to acknowledge the fundamental shifts in power and wealth that have taken place in the world. Biden's inability to see and to acknowledge the emergence of the multipolar world, and that our best interest actually lies in facilitating the birth of the multipolar world and collaborating constructively with the new poles inside of the multipolar world. Going on, successful management of change would avoid a conflict with Iran. And that's another view of Doug's. We should avoid a conflict with Iran. It would peacefully reconcile competing claims to regional hegemony, as the Chinese recently did with their brokering of the historic rapprochement between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. It would revitalize such multilateral organizations as the UN Security Council and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Okay, and of course I agree with that. If we could avoid that conflict in West Asia, it would really be great for the internal politics, okay, of West Asia. It would reconcile the competing claims to regional hegemony. And it would allow us and everyone else to revitalize the multilateral organizations that are so important for peace in the world, specifically the UN and the Security Council and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. These actions would cultivate the emergence of new constellations of power along the lines of Metternich and Castlerogg's 1815 concert of Europe. Metternich, of course, was he was a prince and the prime minister of Austria, okay, at that time, and very conservative in his desire for the reconstruction, okay, of Europe and the continued rule by the monarchs and the oligarchs, okay, of Europe. Okay, Castlereagh, of course, was the prime minister of Great Britain at that time. Okay, and he also was very much in favor of reconstructing a conservative political regime in Europe that would no longer threaten the status quo. This was in the wake, okay, of the Napoleonic Wars. But still, this statement, these actions would cultivate the emergence of new constellations of power along the lines of Metternich and Castlereagh's 1815 concert of Europe. This statement puzzles me. I'm very well aware of the history of the 19th century in Europe. I studied it very closely for years and years. And I'm very well aware of what happened in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars. But I don't see that the emergence of new constellations of power that would be consistent with the multipolar world we have now, that these would resemble the constellations of power that were constructed in Europe following the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Okay, I wish that he would elaborate on that rather fascinating statement because I respect Douglas's knowledge of history, and I'd like to see what he sees in this that would be so similar to the Europe of 1815, okay, and the following years. Uh, in other words, there was a concert of Europe, okay, which emerged after that and which kept the peace in Europe for close to 100 years, except for the Crimean War of the 1850s. And so it was very successful in keeping the peace and managing the transition to more modern societies, inside of Europe. But I don't see the similarity between the constellations of power, that are emerging now, and the constellations of power, that uh, followed the wars of the late 18th century and the early 19th century. I'd love to talk to him about that. Anyway, just as no question of strategic security in Europe can be solved without Russian participation, Washington cannot create stability in the Middle East by unconditionally backing Israel's territorial ambitions. I completely agree with that statement. Uh, some may find it controversial because, of course, the Europeans and the Americans have been resisting mightily resolving questions of security in Europe through getting the participation, okay, of Russia. But Putin has for years been trying to get the Europeans and the United States to join with him to create a new security framework inside of Europe. And the Europeans, following us, have been refusing to do that. That was, of course, the proximate cause, okay, of the Ukraine war. In other words, what Russia wanted to do then was to develop a new security framework that would give itself a chance to develop in a peaceful fashion. And we didn't want to do that. All we wanted to do was to create a proxy that would weaken Russia in what amounted to a war of choice. Now, as it happened, the Russians struck first in actually starting a war, but there's no question that the cause of that war was our own actions in Eastern Europe, going back to 2014 and before. So there's that. Going on. An American failure to manage its own transition to multipolarity will create more chaos and ignite a major war in the Middle East, not to mention a full-blown war with Russia and eventually China. Now, I greatly agree with that statement. I don't know why I did not emphasize it the first time around. That is a very pregnant statement. I completely agree with it.
Right, because the U.S. is fixed on that hegemony ideology. They want to control the world.
And the question is whether Trump will be fixated on that. That's one question. The other question is if he himself doesn't want to be fixated on that, wants to break away from that, and wants to recognize the multipolar world because he thinks that will be better for business, then that desire of his is in conflict with Israel's current intention. And I think it is Israel's current intention. And this intention may be shared by the Biden administration to start a war with Iran before Trump comes into power So he's not able to disengage himself. So there's a conflict there. And I don't know if this conflict is widely recognized, in the area, of American politics. I don't know whether the Congress explicitly recognizes that. In fact, I think most of the Congress is probably still wanting to maintain our hegemony in foreign policy.
Oh, definitely. And
Okay, and I think that's bad. It's not in our interest, okay, at all. Okay, but of course, it's very much opposed to Colonel McGregor's view of the situation and what he wants to do and what he wants Trump to do. And it may be in conflict with what Trump actually wants to do. Uh, I don't think any of us know whether Trump is going to be clever enough to avoid this net that people are trying to entrap him in.
mhm.
Okay, because if he did intend to avoid such a net, then why has he been nominating the group of foreign policy idiots that he has been nominating? I mean, these are all people who would entrap him in the drive towards a hegemonic foreign policy. Okay, anyway,
Well,
uh,
he's been letting that woman, what's her name? That woman that was with the Reagan administration, and she's been so with the Republican leadership. She's the one that's choosing all the people for his administration. I can't think of her name. I'd have to look it up.
you're not thinking of Laura Loomer, are you?
No, there's a woman that she's an older woman, but she's they mentioned her name. That she's pretty much the one that is going through who the appointee should be.
Okay, is she in the Congress or outside?
Outside. She's always been a part of the Republican politics, or the Republican, I guess, the RNC, you would say. I'd
Uh,
have to, I have to look her name up. I
okay,
don't.
so are you thinking of a neocon woman?
I can't even. I never even really recognized her name before. Let me look it up.
Okay, all right. So going on with this piece, okay, uh, uh, I'll repeat the last sentence. American failure to manage its own transition to multipolarity will create more chaos and ignite a major war in the Middle East, not to mention a full blown war with Russia and eventually China. An outlook that prioritizes avoiding conflict, not starting new conflicts, must replace nearly 3 decades of feckless leadership in foreign affairs, says Doug. Well, he really lays it out there, doesn't he? New thinking in defense and foreign policy should rank diplomacy and peaceful cooperation first over the use, okay, of military power. So there it is. That's what he thinks. He wants to go back to diplomacy and peaceful cooperation and collaboration. But I mean, Doug McGregor, peacenik. I mean, what's going on here?
I don't know. It's a crazy world.
And then the next thing he mentions, okay, is Bonaparte. Bonaparte quipped that in war, truth is the first casualty. Nothing has changed since then. Washington is a veritable fountainhead of lies, feeding an unending stream of false narratives regarding the true character of the jihadist hordes raging across Syria. Well, as I said before in one of my streams, I don't think they're exactly hordes. There's something like 25,000 to 35,000 of them. So that's not exactly a horde to compare with the hordes of Genghis Khan, when he was attacking Europe. I mean, it's uh, the IRGC, uh, uh, if it invaded Syria, would totally brush aside these jihadist hordes. But anyway, going on. For our purposes, however, it is important to note the alignment of powers behind the Islamic factions now pillaging and terrorizing Syria. I guess it is true that they are pillaging and terrorizing Syria, all 25,000 of them. But I think it's also true, okay, that the Syrians are starting to reorganize themselves to defend themselves against the hordes, so called. In other words, they've been reacting to the pillaging, okay, and the terrorizing, and they're beginning to arm themselves again. And they're going to be fighting with the jihadists. Of course, they're already fighting with the jihadists. The Kurds are already fighting with the jihadists. That's true, but it's only a small matter of a very short amount of time until the Alawites and other Syrian groups are fighting back. And I think the jihadists are going to find that there's a lot more than they can handle. I mean, there were, what was it, 28 million people, okay, in Syria, and most of them were not the jihadists, and the jihadists are not that well armed. They have no air force and very few tanks, and they're not noted for their artillery either. So, anyway, Washington seems blithely oblivious to Syria's destruction and the emergence of joint Israeli Turkish hegemony across the Near East. Well, again, I think the Iranians will have something to say about that, and probably very soon. Going on. Okay. The disintegration of Syria does, however, open up a short window of opportunity for Tel Aviv to attack uh, um, Iran. I think that's very true. But perhaps it also opens up a short window of opportunity for Iran to attack Tel Aviv.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, I don't know what's standing in the way now because Syria and its army uh, is no longer standing in the way.
No. Okay,
Going
but I
okay.
was going to say, by the way, the woman's name is Susie Wiles. She's the
Oh,
new chief of
Susie
staff.
Wiles, yeah, she's the chief of staff.
Yeah, and she's the one that's going through the list of people to choose too. And she's been
Yeah,
an old-time Republican.
yeah, yes, I guess she is. So she's the one who's putting in uh, all these neocon people, or putting them up for appointments.
Yes.
Is she the one behind Hegseth? Okay, I'm sure she's behind the appointment of Rubio.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure, but is she
Heck,
behind the appointment of Sebastian Gorka and Hegseth?
some of these people, some of the people I'm thinking he just has people he just likes. He likes because of Fox News and being on Fox News. And
Yes, and probably Hegseth comes from that.
yes, he does.
And that was just an idiot appointment. He's never going to get confirmed, I don't think.
Right.
Uh, okay, going on. As the Times of Israel report noted, while previously the quote IAF would not fly directly over Damascus, when carrying out strikes on Iran linked targets, okay, in the capital, it now can. Yes, that's true, but of course, okay, if Iran were to fling 2,000 ballistic missiles at all of the Israeli air bases, in Iran, then the IAF would not be able to fly directly over Damascus or any other place. It wouldn't be able to fly anymore. I don't understand why people can't see that. In other words, why doesn't it make sense for the Iranians to try to remove the air power of Israel right now before Trump takes office? I mean, to me, that's extremely good sense. Uh, anyway, going on with the piece. Netanyahu believes he has the wind at his back. Emboldened by the collapse of the Assad regime, he will turn his attention, okay, to Lebanon, southern Syria, okay, and the West Bank. Well, he will, okay, but again,
It
uh,
has to be stopped. He has to be stopped.
he has to be stopped. But also, the Iranians have the power to stop him.
Right.
So the question is, will they? Going on, one predictable consequence of an attack on Iran will be a solidifying of the Chinese brokered Iran Saudi rapprochement and a hardening of the blocs in the greater Middle East, which will see Iran, backed by Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, set against a temporary Israel Turkish bloc backed by Washington and its European vassals. And that's a very interesting possibility that he calls attention to here. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen because I think Iran is going to beat Israel to the punch. Okay, Doug obviously doesn't think that, or he would talk about that here. Now, also, as we'll see in a short while, Scott doesn't think that also. Scott thinks, the Iranians are going to wait. Uh, anyway, Doug goes on. Iran is not Iraq. At 90 million people, it is double Iraq's population, has a more developed economy, and has more powerful allies than Saddam Hussein ever did. Oh, that is so very true. So very true. Saddam Hussein, never had the Russians behind him, and he never had the Chinese behind him. Contrary to neoconservative expectations, there are no cakewalks in the greater Middle East. Yes, we thought, that Iraq was a cakewalk, but we were mired in this cakewalk for how many years? 15 years or more? We were mired down in this cakewalk. It looked like a cakewalk at first. I mean, yes, it did. Okay, but it ended up in very bitter fighting over a very long period of time. And 1 million of the Iraqis died. It was very bloody and very costly for us. It cost us $7 trillion. Those are the estimates, actually, right now. But he's right to call attention to this and to point out that war with Iran would be much more costly. And I think the expectation is if we fought a war with Iran in West Asia, we would lose. when I say we would lose, I don't mean that, they would come back to the United States. There would be blowback here, though there might be some blowback if the Russians were to get involved on their side. Uh, but I mean, if we sent troops there, it would be incredibly costly. And as I've said before so many times on this program, there are 68 American bases that are surrounding Iraq. I don't think they're surrounding Iraq. I'm sorry, they're not surrounding Iran as much as Iran is holding them hostage. Okay, because Iran's missiles could nullify every one of those bases in a very short time. And there's something like 40,000 Americans at those bases that would be likely to die in any exchange. This would be much more costly for us than the Iraq War. And it's not something we need to be getting involved with. Now, Doug realizes that and very much opposes it. The question is, will Trump come to realize that? And will he do it quickly enough to avoid involvement in that? And here's the last paragraph of Doug's piece. The only certainty amid the chaos is that, thanks to the connivance of Biden, Netanyahu, and Erdogan, a wider war in the greater Middle East is only just beginning. It is one we will come to regret. So Doug publishes this in the American Conservative, and he's warning the conservatives across the country, because this, of course, is their premier publication. And he is saying, don't get involved in the war in Iran. Trump should not get involved. If he does, we will come to regret it, and it might ruin his presidency besides. And I think Doug is quite right about that. Quite right about that. I thought it would be very interesting, though, to compare the opinions and the outlook of Doug as expressed in this article with the opinions and outlook of Scott Ritter that he expresses in parts of this very lengthy interview, with Nima Al-Rashid. Nima Al-Rashid is the host of Dialogue Works, and that is the program that this has appeared on. We're going to pick up this at about 49 minutes and 54 seconds in, and we'll go through it, to the end. That's about 33 minutes, and we'll probably take at least another hour to go through it. And Dee and I will both participate in making comments and doing analysis on this as we proceed. But we're going to share things. Well, before I get into sharing things first, we have again just a few people here tonight. Steve says hello, everybody. Evelina says hello, all. Lana says, I am cooking and listening in the background. Share it to Facebook. Thank you, Lana. Steve says hi, Lana. Lana says, howdy, Steve. Evelina says, somebody suggested ultimately Turkey and Iran will negotiate to divide between them influence in Syria with the idea of getting rid of Israel. Do you see the possibility of this occurring? I don't see the possibility, okay, of this occurring uh, 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 unless, God bless you, honey, okay, unless there are actual military actions, against Israel uh, 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 by both parties. And of course, the United States is currently committed to backing Israel. So this makes things very, very complicated. But uh, 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 providing that both parties are willing to, to use military force against Israel, uh, then there is the possibility, okay, of this occurring. But I think both would have to destroy, the Israeli air power. I think the Iranians can do that themselves with a comprehensive missile attack, basically destroying all of the Israeli air bases. I think that can be done. Uh, I think Turkey could support that in various ways, okay, if it wanted to. But of course, the United States, okay, would very much oppose that. On the other hand, the Iranians could do it with a very quick attack. And the United States and Turkey and Israel would not have time to react before the air bases were destroyed. Evelina correctly points out both Turkey and Iran have warned Israel to stop, okay, expansion. So we have a new person called Holsey 0815 uh, who says things that it's very hard for me to grok. First, he or she says, I know what you mean, but though they got rid of her, I don't know who you're talking about there. I mean, maybe her is Susan Wiles, but I don't think Trump has gotten rid of Susan Wiles.
No, she's still there.
She's still there. Uh, and then Halsey says, over that Carrie Lake threat? What does Carrie Lake have to do anything? She lost her election in Arizona. And as far as I know, she's not a factor in anything right now. Halsey 0815 says Colonel McGregor must have gotten him a Russian GF. I'm not sure what a Russian GF is, but I don't think that Colonel McGregor has any appreciable contacts with the Russians at all. Nor do I think he has any special favoritism to Russia. What he's about is doing things for America. Then Halsey says they had that coming. Dugin wanted to do the same to Turkey in his book. I haven't read Dugin's book, but I know who you're talking about. Alexander Dugin, the very well-known conservative political theorist. Uh, he's a nationalist, okay, in Russia. His daughter was killed uh, uh, killed by a bomb that may have been meant for him, that was uh, sent in by the Ukrainians, was a pure act of terrorism. He said, use the Kurds, okay, and Armenians, though no Daesh. Oh, that's what Dugan said. That makes sense. Yeah, he says something about Dugan 20 years, and we probably orchestrated the counter move ourselves. And he says, too bad Israel ain't too smart. They took the whole bait. GF probably means girlfriend. Oh, good. Sorry I didn't pick up. Oh, McGregor must have gotten himself a Russian girlfriend. No, never. He's much more likely to get a German girlfriend. Anyway, Lana says, I can no longer see the new person's comments. I don't know why. I can see the comments. They were YouTube comments. I don't know why we can't see them. But anyway, let's get to the Scott, okay, and Nima video right now. I'll present that. Okay, Dee, please feel free to interrupt at any time.
Okay.
And I'll stop it, and we can talk about, have good conversation about it. So we're starting out at 49.54 in.
We have
I treated myself to a wild Alaskan company membership, and my only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. Every month, I get a box of.
Sorry about that. And the buffering. I don't know how to stop that.
She's out. There will be no militarization of Europe. This is a NATO wet dream. And as I said, NATO isn't here much longer. NATO can't survive without the United States, and Trump has no interest in saving NATO.
I treated myself to a wild Alaskan company membership, and my only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. Every month, I get a box of.
We had a huge rally in Turkey. Erdogan's sons managed this rally against Israel. How do you see the situation right now in Syria? Are we heading toward some sort of cooperation between Turkey and Israel, or they're heading towards some sort of confrontation and which can get worse?
Well, I mean, Syria is falling apart as we speak. What do you expect? You put a Al Qaeda guy in charge. He brings in his own Al Qaeda guy as the director of intelligence. They're running around, destroying churches, hunting down Alawites. There will be a civil war in Syria. It'll explode into a civil war that'll draw in outside powers. So it'll become a regional conflict done by proxy, and that's that. And I think everybody would be okay with this because we never really, again, I tried to tell people.
Okay, I thought that Scott's prediction of a civil war in Syria is very apt. We are seeing it start now. We are seeing the many groups now beginning to arm themselves again, and they're going to harass, the new government. And the new government, they were, a unified front, when they overthrew the government of Syria. But they're made up of different factions used to going their own way. And I think they're going to start to go their own way now. I don't think that Al Jolani is going to be able to control them. And I think they're going to keep up the pillaging of Syria. That's going to create a resistance.
And it's frightening for the civilians there, and the fact that Europe, different European countries, are pushing for the Syrians that are there as refugees to go back to Syria.
Well, yeah, they're pushing for that to happen, but I don't think the Syrians are going to want to go back.
I don't think so either. It's too dangerous.
It's too dangerous to go back. It's not a very attractive sort, of prospect. Okay, now maybe if the Europeans were to arm them all with guns, maybe some of them, would go back, basically to liberate Syria from the jihadis. I suppose that's a minor possibility, but I don't see the Europeans doing that.
No. They're trying to all act like, oh, everything is great now. Assad's not there, like it's some peaceful place. I mean, it's like, wake up. There's a reality check. There's a lot going on in there. It's a dangerous place.
It's a very dangerous place. And I think the conflict between the Kurds and the Turks, is very intense even right now. Anyway, going on.
I went down to Tampa and I spoke with, Syrian American community. And how do you tell them that nobody cares about you? Well, part of you're isolated, don't you understand? You're isolated for a reason. Nobody cares about you. Nobody's going to lose any sleep over you. Nobody even knows you. Syrian American. What does that mean? Syrian. What does that mean? And so Syria will blow up into this perpetual conflict. It'll just keep on going, and it'll be used as a way to vent steam as a pressure relief valve. But again, pressure relief valve involves heat, which heat is generated through friction. That friction is conflict, which will kill people. So Syria will just consume itself for years to come. Is Israel and Turkey going to end up in a direct conflict? No, they won't. They'll fight via proxy in Syria. A million people in the streets of Turkey, fine. I mean, come on, it's a short march. Why stop on the bridge connecting European Turkey with Asian Turkey? Keep on marching. Take those million people and go ahead and cross the border into Syria. Why not? You own that border. Keep on marching. March to the Golan Heights for those million people and on to Jerusalem. It isn't going to happen. You don't know why? Because that's for political show. It's not real. Turkey needs Israel. Turkey wants to be an energy hub. With Syria exploding, do you think that pipeline that everybody's talking about, connecting Qatari gas with Europe is going to be built? No, it's not. Pipelines need stability, and right now Syria is the antithesis of stability. Turkey.
So I think that's a very good comment, by Scott. Okay, people have been talking about a pipeline from Qatar into Europe, and there's a question of how to locate that pipeline. One of the things that's bandied about is, of course, to go through Israel. And the Israelis, of course, have been interested in digging an alternative to the Suez Canal, from the port of Eilat, through the northern part of Gaza, into the Mediterranean. On the other hand, though, Israel is not exactly a stable place right now for that pipeline either. Syria is not a stable place for such a pipeline. Okay, so where is the pipeline going to go? Of course, the Turks will try to find a way because they want to be the hub that brings the oil to Europe.
Turkey needs Israeli gas. They need the gas coming out of those those gas fields off the coast in the Mediterranean. Turkey needs a sound economic relationship with Israel. Israel is about ready to become a regional power economically. You know, if they can emerge from this difficulty, they're in a much stronger position today than they were even a month and a half ago. A month and a half ago, I'd be giving Israel the last rites. Today, I'm like, well, damn it, they're back on their feet. They're strong.
Okay, so that's something Scott has been saying now for some time, and I don't understand why he thinks that. Hezbollah has not been defeated by Israel. It's still there, and it still has a huge stock of missiles and rockets and drones, and it's ready to use them. The Houthis have been giving Israel fits, absolute fits now. Okay, they keep escalating with more and more rockets, okay, and missiles. And they're directly attacking Israel now, and they're getting through the Iron Dome and creating chaos in Israel. And they're threatening to escalate and to accelerate at this point. Now, the Iranians are holding off. And as I said, one has to wonder why. Scott's going to have some things to say about that. Okay. But he's right that Turkey wants the gas and oil from off the coast of Gaza. And one reason why Israel has taken over the northern part of Gaza so that it can have the oil and gas wealth coming out of that part, okay, of the Mediterranean, and so it won't go to a new state, okay, of Palestine.
Stronger than ever. They still have problems in Gaza and Hezbollah, but those problems now are solvable problems. A month and a half ago, I wasn't calling them solvable problems.
Well, what makes them solvable now if they weren't solvable a month and a half ago? I mean, if we look at the situation inside of Israel right now, we see a divided country with a lot of civil unrest internally. Of course, the Israelis now have the invasion of Syria claim some sort of victory. That's not a victory over Hezbollah, though. It's not a victory over Hamas. Hamas launched a ballistic missile at Israel today. Launched a ballistic missile from the northern part of Israel, but going to Jerusalem. I suppose it was aimed at the Israeli parts of that city. The first time, I believe, Hamas launched a ballistic missile. No one thought they had any. And no one thought that such attack would come from the northern part of Israel, which Israel has been devastating since October 7th. It must have come out of the rubble somewhere. Anyway, Hamas is still a factor and is still killing Israeli troops. There's a ceasefire with Hezbollah right now, but how long the ceasefire can last, I don't know, given the situation. A lot depends on what Iran does. It depends on what Iran does. Israel is not in a stronger position right now when you talk about potentials and capabilities. Its supply lines are stretched because it has the troops in Syria. If the ceasefire gets broken, they'll have to defend themselves against Hezbollah attacks. Will they have to withdraw from Syria then? I mean, they don't have the manpower to do both areas. And Hamas, too. That's too many fronts. Now they're talking about major attacks on the Houthis. I don't think they'll get to first base on that one going on.
Iran does not want a conflict. You have an Iranian president that's bending over backwards to make good with the West. And so, Israel will emerge, and you're going to see all the nations that were critical of Israel, most of them, maybe the Irish won't, but others will, change their policy on Palestine. There will be no more talk about a Palestinian state. Why? There was nothing. How do you build a Palestinian state? The only hope was that Gaza would remain in control of Hamas. Hard to do if you can't be resupplied. And so I think you're going to see the depopulation of Gaza, the West Bank. I think.
So there's a big point there. Scott thinks that Gaza is finished because he thinks the Iranians and Hezbollah will not be able to resupply them. That also depends on what the Iranians do. If they stay quiescent, if they stay in a posture waiting for Trump, then it will be hard to resupply Hamas. But there's chaos in Syria right now. What if the IRGC sends 100,000 troops into Syria? Will it really be very difficult or impossible to resupply Hamas then or Hezbollah then? I don't know. Scott's he's assuming here that the peace faction inside of Iran is dominant and that it's going to stay dominant in the short run.
I think you're going to see the emboldenment of Israeli settlers who will come in and start clearing out village after village. If you don't have land, you don't have a state. I mean, I've heard people, the Palestinian state will exist in our hearts. Good luck. That and $1.75 gets you a cup of coffee somewhere. But other than that, you got nothing in your hearts. Is that really what all these people died for? So that you could say Palestine exists in my heart? Screw you. If that was your approach, screw you. They didn't need to die then. Because if it just exists in your heart, it could exist in your heart without death. They died because you wanted a physical entity called the Palestinian homeland. That's gone. That's not going to happen. Not for decades. So I think Israel is going to be strong, and Turkey is going to be linking itself economically to that because Turkey wants to be the energy hub for Europe. That's its strategic vision. And Turkey's going to get what it wants. Turkey doesn't want Jerusalem. They can talk about wanting Jerusalem, but Turkey's sort of happy with Aleppo, Idlib, Raqqa.
I think Scott is right about that. I don't think Turkey is going to fight with Israel, over Jerusalem.
I don't think so either. I agree with him because this is where we're seeing their focus.
Okay, about the idea that no one cares about Syria. uh, I'm not sure that I completely agree with that. Okay. I think maybe Russia cared about Syria, Iran cared about Syria. The one thing that happened internally in recent times was that the Russians and the Iranians were giving advice to the Syrians about what they should do to clean up their act inside of Syria, particularly what they should do to ensure the loyalty of their armed forces. In Russia's case, in speaking to Assad, they laid out reforms for him to follow and even said they would pay for those reforms. They would give the money to Syria to implement those reforms. The Russians cared enough about Syria to be willing to do that. And the Iranians certainly cared about what happened to Syria as well. But Assad shifted horses in midstream. He was allied with Iran, and Russia as part of the Shia Crescent, to facilitate the passage of supplies, to Lebanon and to the Shia populations there, and to Hezbollah there. They had something going. But Assad, decided in recent years that he wanted a rapprochement with the Arab oil states. And he wanted their financial support. And he went to great lengths to try to get it. And there was a surface support that they were giving to him. He was welcomed into the Arab League again. But I would argue that in getting close to them, he was abandoning his real allies, specifically Russia, and Iran. And he wasn't listening to their advice, and he wasn't collaborating with them anymore. He was trying to please the Arab oil dictatorships. When it came down to it, those dictatorships did not support him against the jihadis and Turkey. So he gave up his allies. And that contributed mightily to the crisis in Syria that saw the fall of the regime. So what I'm saying is, there were people and nations that cared about what happened to Syria. But the Syrian leader distanced himself from them for some time. That led to the fall of Assad. And the Syrians found then that they didn't have any allies to oppose the emergence of chaos, in Syria. But I think to say that no one cares about them, is a stretch.
They'll be looking at Mosul next, I think, and then then maybe they'll be looking at Baku, things of this nature before they start.
He's talking about the Turkish attempt to reestablish, a part of the empire. Okay, that is to extend themselves. Of course, they're already, about to annex the northern part of Syria, okay, and the city of Aleppo. Very, very important, okay, as an industrial center. And they really want that. And they think that that was a part of Turkey that was cut out of Turkey basically by the European allies, by France and Britain. Uh, uh, at the end of the First World War, the Turks have always resented that. What the Turks then want to do is to move to the east and take over the oil fields now occupied by the Kurds, okay, and the Americans in the northeastern part of Syria, because of course they want the oil resources there. Then Scott is saying they want to move into Iraq and take the northern part of Iraq in the area of Mosul and Kirkuk, which are areas where the Kurds are also very important and have a significant amount of military power. And then he's saying the Turks want to move as far, okay, as Baku in order to reconstitute a good part of the old Turkish Empire, at least, okay, in that area of the world. This is the wet dream, okay, of Erdogan. And Scott sees them as pursuing that as vigorously as they can, and he's probably right. But whether that's going to prove feasible for them, is another thing. It depends on what the Iranians are willing to do with the Kurds. I mean, I can see the Iranians not wanting the Turks to move in that way. And I can see the Iranians supporting the Kurds with arms in order to resist the Turkish incursions in that part of Syria and in the northern part of Iraq. I think that's going to be difficult.
Start looking at Jerusalem. That's just a feel-good moment where the Turks have always come out and talked big about their support for Palestine. They don't support Palestine. Nobody supports Palestine. The Houthi do. God bless the Houthi. They're out there just saying, we'll keep firing missiles. If nobody else will, we'll keep firing missiles.
So Scott is saying here that Hezbollah no longer supports Palestine. He's implying that, and that Iran no longer supports Palestine, and that both of them are ready to give up their support of Palestine. But when you look at what Hezbollah and Iran have already done, they've made considerable investment in support of Palestine when no one else would. Now, the Arab leaders, the Arab street cares about Palestine. The Arab leaders do not care about Palestine. And we know they don't care because they haven't been doing anything to support the idea of Palestine. As far as they've gone, is the Saudis saying that they're not going to normalize their relations with Israel until there's a Palestinian state. But they haven't contributed any military support. They haven't really been a big headache for Israel, in the struggle with the Palestinians. But the Iranians have. Hezbollah has. Certain groups in Syria have. Scott's assuming that they're going to give up. And it's interesting to see why he thinks that's so.
And Israel bombs them, and they're saying, we'll keep firing missiles. It's tragic, more people dying, but the Houthi, at least, they don't have a reverse gear.
Did Harvard University just find a way to restore crystal clear 20/20 vision without glasses?
I'll tell you that.
And do you think that Israel would be in a position to attack Iran?
Nah. Israel's got to be careful. I mean, they're looking good right now, but they still haven't solved that problem of the 1,000 to 2,000 missiles landing on their tiny little country, and the fact they don't have an air defense system. That's a reality that exists. I think Israel right now would be well advised to let Iran move in the direction that the Iranian president is trying to take it. That could lead to a good.
So Scott thinks the Israelis should do nothing now. But we hear news of the Israelis planning to attack Iran. Scott thinks they won't, and as we go forward, we see him stating some good reasons why they might not. Okay, but Doug McGregor thinks that Israel is in a hurry to attack Iran before Trump gets in, so that Trump has his hands tied and has to engage in a war he doesn't want to engage in. So while Scott and Doug certainly agree on what should happen and what kind of world we should see, they do not agree on how Israel is going to behave in the next, well, now it's less than a month. What is it, 24 days, 23 days until Trump takes over?
Did Trump warn them ahead of time that he doesn't approve of it?
I don't know if Trump can warn them. And if he does warn them, I don't know whether Netanyahu would listen to him. If Netanyahu is currently fixed on the idea of dragging Trump into war, then he will go to whatever lengths he can manage, to attack Iran now. Which, by the way, if Iran sees those preparations, then, of course, that shifts the internal politics inside of Iran, because then there's great motivation for the Iranians to attack first, to do True Promise 3 first, beat the Israelis to the punch. I think a lot of the Iranians have been making preparations for True Promise 3 for a long time, and that they are ready to go. I also think the Iranians have an incentive to get atomic weapons now in the next few days. Scott knows they have the capability to do that, as we'll see. I think it's the Iranian interest to confront Trump with the fait accompli. With two fait accomplis. One, the acquisition of nuclear weapons. But two, this potentially devastating attack on Israel, which I think the Iranians are capable of at this point. Now, Scott is discounting this because he thinks the Peace Party is in control inside of Iran, as we will see in just a minute or two. And he may be right about that at this point, but I think the balance is very delicate here. And that if it's known that the Israelis are making preparations for a new attack on Iran, I think that changes the balance of forces inside of Iraq.
Most definitely, and they have to be aware of it.
They have to be aware of it. It's very visible. I mean, the preparation should be very visible, uh, 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 based on satellite intelligence. And the Russians will be screaming at them that the Israelis are preparing an attack. And if the Russians are screaming at them, certainly the Iranians are going to know about it. And by the way, all through this period, when the Iranians have been contemplating True Promise 3, I'm sure the Russians have been acquiring more of the S-400 systems to oppose any possible Israeli attack. In other words, the air defense of the Iranians was pretty strong during the October 26th attack, okay, by Israel. But it's now 2 months later, 2 months in which the Russians have had to supply Iran with new S-400 systems and new fighter jets. Okay, and we know the Russians have been supplying them with, I forget what the plane is called, the Su-35. Okay, it's the Russian analog of the F-35, and they've been sending some of them but to Iran, along with Russian aviators, to fly them until the Iranians can be sufficiently trained to fly them themselves. Now, those planes can be used for air defense against the F-35s, but by the way, they could also be used for offense. In other words, maybe the True Promise attack is not only going to be a missile attack, but might also involve attack by planes as well. But that's a speculation that I don't have any hard notions on. It's just a possibility, I'm raising. Let's go forward again.
Negotiated into the Iranian nuclear program. And that's what Israel wanted all along. So I think that's the strategic direction that Israel will probably be leaning to, not to, finish off Iran, because Iran isn't going to be finished off. Iran's not Syria. That's another mistake that these amateur.
So Scott thinks that the Israelis won't attack Iran now. That they will wait for the inauguration of Trump, because they think that the peace party inside of Iran is currently in control, of Iran, and that once Trump gets into office, he will negotiate a deal with them in order to remove the nuclear capability, of Iran, to get Iran to give up the nuclear capability it's been developing for some time, in return for all kinds of security guarantees, withdrawal of sanctions, all kinds of good stuff, which Scott will talk about now.
Geopolitical analysts make. Syria fell, therefore Iran is about to fall. I don't know. Iran was sort of stress tested in 2023 with the major uprisings, and they emerged from that pretty strong. One of the things about Iran, though, is that it is a democracy, maybe not Jeffersonian in nature, but there's definitely element of democracy there. And the Iranian democracy has elected a moderate president because they want moderate policies. So why, if I'm the Israelis and I'm saying, well, this moderate president seems to be moving Iran in a direction that sort of the where we want them to go. I mean, if we were to replace the Iranian leadership and put somebody in, that's the direction we'd want them to go. So why don't we just let this happen? So I think that's the direction we're happy. They're not going to attack Iran. That again, that would be stupid because now Iran will have 2,000 missiles, that 1,000 to 2,000 missiles that will do a lot of damage to Israel.
Right. So Scott's assuming that the Israelis are sitting there looking at the internal politics of Iran and are saying, let's wait because this is going the way we want it to go. When Trump gets in, he's going to negotiate, with Iran. And we're going to get the kind of outcome we want, and we won't have to do any fighting. But then there's the opposing view, of Doug McGregor, who's saying that what the Israelis think is their interest is a quick attack on Iran to start a war with Iran
Mm-hmm.
in order to tie Trump's hands and to bring him into the war with Iran. Now, certainly the Biden administration would be on the side of this Israeli desire. So my point is that Trump and Colonel McGregor, Scott, Colonel McGregor, have opposing views of the political dynamics here, directly opposing views. And what Iran will do is very much dependent on who is right. Because if Iran sees the preparations being made for an attack on it, I think it's very likely to hit first. And as I keep saying, if I'm them, what I do now is first I go after the Israeli air bases to try to knock out everyone. Now, they did serious damage, to the Nevatim air base up in the south of Israel, up in the negative, with the 200 missile attack, they got off on October 1st. But now we're talking about a 2,000 missile attack. I think that's enough to cripple every single one of the Israeli air bases. After all, how many did they have? 6 or something like that? They could destroy those air bases with their missiles. At least keep them out of commission for weeks. And during that time, there would be no defense against, further Iranian missiles, no possibility of an Israeli attack, but no protection for the Israeli forces in Syria. They would be open to air attack from Iran, both from missiles and from the Iranian Air Force, because the Israeli Air Force would be destroyed on the ground or would have no place to land. So I don't see why Scott is not discussing this possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd like to have his opinion on this possibility because he and Doug are the military experts. I'm not a military expert. But I'd like to know why they don't think there's a serious possibility that the Iranians would hit the Israelis with such a devastating attack if they see the Israelis preparing to hit them, as Doug thinks the Israelis are likely to do before Trump comes in. So these 23 days that we're looking at are very critical 23 days. And we all should be very alert at what the Israelis are preparing to do. So there's that. I'll go on.
I think right now Donald Trump has two options with the case of Iran and Russia. Both of these countries want to talk with Donald Trump, as their officials were talking about. And here comes the question. You mentioned that Israel would want some sort of talk between maybe the United States and Iran, but we know that from the history, from JCPOA, Netanyahu is not going to get along with any sort of negotiations between the United States and Iran. This is the problem in my mind, in my opinion, right now.
Why? What if the negotiations ended the Iranian nuclear program? Would Netanyahu be supportive of that? The answer is yes, he would. And I think that's understand that Donald Trump isn't Barack Obama. Donald Trump's not looking to make a compromise that is bad for Israel and bad for the United States. Donald Trump is looking for, as he said when he withdrew from the JCPOA, a better deal. Remember, he said that when he withdrew from the JCPOA. He withdrew from the JCPOA because of intelligence pressure placed on him by Benjamin Netanyahu. So after all the pressure that Netanyahu brought to bear, what did Trump say?
A performance that truly matters. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
Sorry about that, Ed.
Burn down the Iranian house? Nope. We want a better deal. That was the reality back then. That's the reality today. And Netanyahu's he's doesn't have as much leverage over Trump today as he had back then. So I think Netanyahu will go with whatever. If Trump can negotiate a deal that has the Iranians give up their nuclear program, and then begin to have better relations with the West, the next thing you know, Trump will say, if you want really good relations with the West, we have to start talking about bringing down your ballistic missile capability. Gosh, there's two things Israel really wants. Now, is the Iranian president able to deliver on that? We'll find out. I remember talking to or exchanging texts with Dr. Morandi, and you know him very well. And he was like, Iran will never negotiate away its nuclear program. But I kept quoting him. I said, well, what do you think? What's the Iranian president doing? And he said, look, we're into very difficult, challenging times, which is his way of saying he doesn't know where Iran's going. And if Morandi doesn't know, that means that there is pressure inside Iran to negotiate away its nuclear program.
Now, Scott is right about there being pressure inside of Iran to negotiate with Trump. And there might even be pressure, to negotiate away the nuclear program. But whether there's pressure to negotiate away the stock of missiles Iran has and the capability, of Iran to deliver those missiles, I don't think there's any pressure to negotiate away that, because that's what's been protecting them against Israeli attacks. The possibility of such an action by Iran. I mean, that's the deterrence, that Iran has against Israel. It has to keep that missile capability. It might consider for a moment, though I think it would be stupid for them to negotiate away on the nuclear capability they have. In other words, when you look at what's happened to the states that have already negotiated away the nuclear capability they had, Like for example, in Libya, when they negotiated away, what happened to Libya, what happened to North Korea when they refused to negotiate away. In other words, there are lessons there. When you keep your nuclear capability, the United States doesn't attack you. When you get rid of your nuclear capability, the United States does attack you because you have no deterrence. I don't think that lesson is going to be lost on Iran. Okay, I also think, Scott is about to talk about the possibility of Iran getting a nuclear bomb in just a few days. And he's very strong on that possibility. He thinks it's a very, very real possibility. In the past, he's even speculated, that they may already have a nuclear weapons capability. I think he's right about that. I think if they've got it, they're not going to negotiate it away. Even if they start talking about, actually negotiating it away, would they negotiate it away without getting the Israelis to give up all their nuclear capability? Man, I wouldn't do that. And you know that Israel is not going to give up its 200 warheads, or maybe 400 warheads, or however many they have. They're never going to give up, their nuclear capability. They don't even admit they have it. Well, recently, this guy Katz, the stupid guy Katz, came out in public, and admitted they had it. But that was the first time. They've been lying about them having it since the middle 1960s. They're not going to give up their nuclear capability. If I'm Iran and someone was telling me to give my nuclear capability up, I would say, sure, I might consider that, but the Israelis have to give up theirs too. So I really don't think that flies. It may have flown when Obama negotiated that agreement with Iran. But that was what? Nearly 10 years ago now. Iran is far stronger militarily now than it was then. Why should it agree to that? In other words, if I'm Iran and the United States begins to negotiate, what I say is, look, we want peace with you. We want commercial relations. We want to do business. But based on your past behavior, we know very well we need to have the capability to defend ourselves, and we're not giving up that capability. That lies in our missiles and in our nuclear deterrent. And we're not going to negotiate away those things. We'll do all kinds of business deals with you. We'll make it worth your while. But we are not going to give that up. We have to continue to be strong, and we insist on being strong. And we're certainly not going to unilaterally disarm, with respect to Israel. Also, we demand something else. We demand an end to the genocide in Palestine. I mean, we're not giving up all kinds of things without you stopping the genocide and establishing a Palestinian state. I mean, you've been committing war crimes. You've been complicit in war crimes for years. Now, Scott doesn't see the Iranians as taking a position like that. But I do. I think they will take that position. Why doesn't Scott think so? Well, let's go on.
Doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. but it means that there's at least somebody inside the Iranian government who's willing to sit down and talk with the United States and Europe about that possibility. And I think that's a direction that Israel will definitely encourage, because you don't have to bomb, if you don't have to bomb Iran and you can still get rid of the nuclear weapons, that would be or nuclear weapons potential. That would be a victory for Israel. Is Iran going to do it? I don't know. I don't know if this moderate president, has the staying power. But I would say that whoever is going to challenge him needs to turn to the supreme leader and say, in addition to us provoking a war with Israel and the United States, because that's what you're talking about, here's our plan for the economic betterment of Iran too. And if I were the supreme leader, I'd say, yeah, how are we doing in 5 years on that economic plan? Oh, well, Mr. President, we'll be digging ourselves out of the Stone Age that we've been bombed into by Israel in the West. What about the 10-year mark? Nah, Mr. President, we'll still be digging ourselves out. About 25 years. Maybe by 25 years, we'll break even to where we are now. So you want a policy that's going to blow the hell out of my country, kill many people, so that in 25 years, we're right where we're at right now. Mr. President, what do you got to say again?
Is your turkey neck giving away your age? Here's a simple way to lift and define your jawline from home. Over 10.
Yes, I'm glad you're talking to me now. I believe that we can negotiate away the nuclear program, the nuclear weapons aspects of it, and that in 5 years we can see our economy grow by 25%. In 10 years, we could look at 150% growth. We'd be looking at economic revival for the Iranian people. And if you're the supreme leader, you go, that's the direction I head. So whoever's going to oppose the Iranian president needs to come up with a plan other than war. Because the Iranian people, I don't believe, want war. They're not dying for a conflict with the West. They've sort of been told that, they had to make these sacrifices, but eventually there will be a payout. Economic times will get better. And I think right now especially after what happened in 2023, at the end of the day, the Iranian people sided with the theocracy, with the regime, with the government. But that's not forever. If the government's unable to deliver on its promise of doing better, if all the government can promise is forever wars, I think maybe that government won't be around for long. And I think the supreme leader understands that in order to make the theocracy attractive, the theocracy has to deliver the goods. So that's why I think you have a moderate president. Didn't have to be this way. If they didn't want a moderate president, the Guardian Council just could have said, nope, sorry, you didn't pass the ideological test. But they passed him, and they knew what his platform was. And they didn't suppress him. They didn't silence him. And when it came time for the runoff election against Jalili, who was hardcore conservative, I mean, the Iranian people had a choice. The choice between the guy that wanted to, confront nuclear weapons, and the guy who said, "No, I'd like to have talks with the West and all this kind of stuff." And the Iranian people chose the guy that wanted to have talks.
Okay. So I think Scott has a powerful argument there. The peace party inside of Iran, can make arguments like that. But the IRGC and the conservatives in Iran can respond with a number of other different ideas. They can point out, first of all, that the Israelis are getting ready to attack Iran. And they're getting ready to attack Iran before Trump comes into power. So the Israelis may not be waiting for Trump to come into power to attack Iran. And they may be willing to attack Iran with nuclear weapons. There was already an explosion in Syria by the Israelis. It was this past week. they bombed something, okay, in Syria. And the type of mushroom cloud that ensued and the size of the explosion as measured on the Richter scale was such that some people are thinking that the Israelis were using a tactical nuke, okay, in Syria. I don't think it's been settled yet as to whether they used a tactical nuke, okay, or not. But certainly the possibility is there that they were using one. The Iranians have to be concerned that if the Israelis attack them first, this time they may be using tactical nukes in order to get rid of their underground capability, okay, of missiles. And if I'm a conservative, okay, inside of Iran, if I'm part of the war party inside of Iran, then what I'm going to say to the supreme leader is, we have no choice. If they attack us first, then they're going to use their nuclear weapons to destroy our missile capability. And the fact that they're underground isn't going to protect us, because this time they're going to come at us, with their nuclear weapons. And they're going to attack us first because they want to present Trump without an alternative. They want to drag him into a war with us, and we won't even get a chance to negotiate with him. So my friend over there may be talking about a negotiation and a deal that's going to bring us prosperity and then the sanctions and all this kind of thing. But the Israelis are not in favor of that course of action. What they're in favor of is attacking us and removing our missile capability. And so what we have to do is to hit them first, and in a way so serious that they have no choice but to negotiate a peace and to take actions involving negotiating a peace before Trump even comes into office. And then when we negotiate with Trump, with Israel in a very weakened position, and with the IRGC moving into Syria to create an open path to Hezbollah, if that's the current situation, then the negotiation with Trump is going to be entirely different. And if he raises the question of getting rid of our nuclear capability, we simply say no. We put this in diplomatic language, but we tell him, look, we need this capability to protect ourselves against Israel and protect ourselves against you. We're not giving up this capability. We're not fools. But if you want to stop fighting, if you want to recognize that we have a multipolar world right now, and that we're hooked in tightly with Russia and China in this particular multipolar world, and you have to recognize our position, then we can negotiate very profitable kinds of economic deals with you. We're perfectly willing to do business with you. We're perfectly willing to collaborate and to be friendly, but we're not giving up our sovereignty. Our nuclear capability and our missiles are our sovereignty, and we're not looking to give that up. We'll never give that up. Going on with what Scott has to say.
I think you have to listen to that if you're the Iranian government, if you're the supreme leader. You can't ignore that. That's the will of the people.
And I think you have to listen to the counter argument, because even though the will of the people was to have relationships which are peaceful, sometimes you can get those peaceful relationships when you confront your opponents with strength. If you confront them with a position of strength, because you've destroyed the air power, okay, of Israel, and along the way maybe driven out also a couple of million settlers as well, then if you make peace offerings that are sincere peace offerings, that may then, in that context, seem like a very good deal to Donald Trump. He wants a better deal. He wanted a better deal than Obama got in 2015, but 2025 is not the same as 2015. And the power position of Iran in 2025 is infinitely better than it was in 2015. And the Iranians should not be negotiating with Trump as if they're in the same power position as they were when he was president. Okay, the last time, or when the original deal was negotiated with Obama. I mean, Iran is in a much different position. The axis of resistance is much stronger now. Hezbollah is much stronger. The Houthis are far stronger. The Iraqi resistance is far stronger. The whole axis of resistance is much stronger, and Iran is in position to reestablish the path through Syria, but to Lebanon. If it sends in 100,000 IRGC troops, that's enough to handle the Israelis in Syria, and it's enough to handle the Turks, because I don't think the Turks in that context are going to go into southern Syria. They're going to have all they can handle trying to handle the Kurds in the north of Syria. And they won't want to confront the Iranians directly anyway. They'll want to fight a proxy war with them. And the Iranians can overwhelm the jihadis. I think there are very strong counter arguments to what Trump is saying, to what Scott is saying, because if the Iranians act in this way and they're successful, then they can have commercial relations with the West, they can have the withdrawal of sanctions, and they can have the strengthening of their new relationships with Russia and China and the BRICS, which, by the way, they should never abandon anyway, because in the long run, those relationships will be more important to them than any relationship they can build with the United States, which is, after all, a declining power. So these are the counter arguments that the war party can give to the peace party in Iran. And I personally think those arguments are more compelling. But Dee, do you have anything to add to this?
No.
But do you agree with this?
Well, actually, I got distracted, so
Oh,
I didn't get to hear much. That's why I didn't want to say anything.
oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to go on.
And it's not about betraying Islam. It's about delivering on the promise of a better economic future for the Iranian people. So I think that's where we're at right now. I get a lot of criticism there. Scott, the Iranians will never negotiate with Scott. You said this. Guys, when I say something, it's because that's what the data presents itself to be. I will tell you this, doing an analysis of Iran's strategic.
I'm just going to say something now that I'm sure that Scott knows, that he knows very well. and that is the data does not present itself. The data we receive is always interpreted by us through some kind of theoretical frame. The question here is not about differences in terms of the data. We know the Iranian people very much want an improvement in their economic situation. But we also know they want an end, to the genocide. We also know they want to be able to defend themselves against any possible moves by Israel, or the West. In other words, the people of Iran want a number of things, not just what Scott is saying they want. In other words, when they voted for Pezeshkian, they never thought that he was going to negotiate away any nuclear capability the Iranians had. They certainly never thought that he was going to negotiate away missile capabilities Iran has. But that's what Trump will be demanding. I don't think the people of Iran are on the side of that.
No, they're not. And they've had a problem. Yes, they voted in Pezeskian, but right now the concerns are what's going on with Israel and their fear of what Israel wants to do. They don't want to get involved in a war, but they see the fact of what Israel's doing.
And they're very much opposed to the genocide.
They are
Care about
extremely
what's going
opposed to the genocide and furious at the fact that Iran is not they're not seeing enough action by Iran. They're not seeing it.
Yes, the popular sentiment inside of Iran right now is in favor of True Promise 3.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So uh, I think Scott is not correct in his interpretation of what the Iranian people might be thinking right now. I think it's a powerful argument. I think in the long term, they can practically taste the improvement in their economic situation. But frankly, I don't think it's the West that's going to deliver the big improvement in their economic situation uh, 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 at all. I think it's BRICS that's going to bring the improvement, in their economic situation. And I also think that in the current situation, if the Iranians attack first and do what I'm suggesting they can do, and they're successful at it, they will find themselves with strong support from the Russians and Chinese, and they will find that there's a major deterrent for Trump to consider if he's considering a major attack on them on behalf of the Israelis. Now he's going to get a lot of pressure from the donors to do that. But when he talks about the balance of power between Russia, China, and Iran versus the alliance that Trump is able to put together to attack Iran, I think Trump will think twice. Of course, he may not think twice depending on the advice he gets. But if he has sense enough to go to people such as Doug McGregor and Danny Davis and other people who are relatively pro-Trump, he will get a realistic assessment of what's going on in West Asia and what the power position of the United States is. And once he finds that out, he is likely to back off.
And then there's another argument that you hear is that Trump looks at different figures in that sense of power. Iran's not showing power. So he's going to look at them as being weak.
But if the Iranians hit first and do what I think they can do, he will be impressed by the power.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's what they have to do. They have to show the power.
They have to show the power. I agree. Okay, if they don't do it, they'll go into negotiations with Trump with a very weak hand, even if the Israelis don't attack them beforehand.
Exactly. Because Trump listens, the U.S. government just listens to what Iran says. I mean, Israel. Whatever Israel says, they don't listen to any other point of view.
Yes. And what Israel will be saying, if Israel doesn't attack Iran first, what Israel will be saying to Trump is, Iran is weak. And we can see it's weak because they never delivered True Promise 3.
That's it.
I think that's it too. Anyway, going forward.
Strategic thinking with Raisi as president, completely different analytical outcomes than with.
No one seems to know this, but Amazon actually has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every single month.
It's just an ad.
This Pezeshkian. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I apologize to the Iranian people. It's a difficult name for me to pronounce. But the Iranian president today is not Raisi. He's not Raisi, not even close to being Raisi. And so people are like, well, Scott, you've changed. I didn't change. The Iranian president changed. I didn't change. My job is to look at the data, is to run the numbers, is to project outcomes. And with this new president, different doors have opened and other doors have shut in terms of analytical outcomes. So, it's not me changing. It's Iran that's changed. They have a new president. And that president apparently has far more clout than many people thought. Some people thought he would just be a figurehead. I think that he is far more than a figurehead. Remember, the Iranian president sits on the Supreme National Security, Supreme National Security Committee, something like that. The big, he's there. It's not like he's, like they phone in. Hey, Mr. President, we just decided. He's there. He's running it. The president's a very powerful man in Iran, a very powerful man. He's not excluded from any aspect of decision making. And so the fact that he's there, articulating his vision.
Okay, I have to add here, he is there and he is very powerful. But most people agree that the foreign policy of Iran is run by the supreme leader, by Khamenei. That he makes final decisions when it comes to foreign policy. I think we have to keep that in mind. I think the president gets a lot of leeway to change policies but domestically in Iran. And I think they allowed him to be elected because they wanted a liberalization of the internal politics of Iran. But I don't think the Ayatollah ever envisioned that Pezeshkian was going to be running foreign policy. I think that distinction is very important.
And the supreme leader isn't rejecting him out of hand. The supreme leader is actually saying, okay, let's take this to the next step. What do we do? Where's True Promise 3? I can tell you right now, the IRGC and the Iranian army was ready to launch it. They're ready. They wanted to do it. It didn't happen. Why? Because you have new political leadership.
I think Scott, is right about that. There's no question Pezeshkian and the reformers have had a big influence in the internal dynamics of politics, inside of Iran. And one of the reasons why True Promise 3 has not happened so far is because of their influence. But the question is, how would that influence be changed if there were an observation that the Israelis were planning an attack, which the Israelis are announcing all over the place, by the way. I mean, it's not some kind of secret. The Israelis have been talking openly about an attack on Iran now.
Political leadership is not looking for a fight with Israel, with the United States, or the West. It's looking actually for diplomatic outcomes. So here we are talking about the potential of diplomacy. I actually think that Iran is an area that Donald Trump could score a huge, huge national security victory and geopolitical victory. There's three places in the world that I think Trump could. Four. Trump has the potential of solving four huge problems.
So this is an interesting vision of Scott's that we're about to get.
And if he does, if he solves even one of them, it's worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize, to be honest. Whether they'll give it to him, who knows? I mean, at least he would have earned it, unlike Barack Obama.
5 words you pronounce wrong 2 years before your brain starts shutting down. Dementia.
Sorry about all these ads. I can do nothing about that if I'm going to play
But Ukraine,
so the video.
He literally has the potential, if he could just jettison his idiots and come in with Putin and say, okay, what do we got? And hold Putin to his words. I mean, I'd come in and sit there and go, Mr. President, you said that you're looking for peace based upon present realities. Okay, the way I see the present reality is you held a referendum. And that referendum, saw you take control of, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. And you've incorporated it in there. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll negotiate something where the Ukrainian troops will withdraw out of these territories, and they're going to leave Kursk because that's yours. Okay, so now we've agreed upon the border. Right, Mr. President? We've agreed upon the border, Mr. President? Straight up. Just call them out on it. Don't leave any opening for Kharkov and Odessa. So we've agreed on the borders, right, Mr. President? Okay, now that we've agreed on the...
Okay, so what if Putin says, no, I don't agree to those borders? Okay, Kharkov is a Russian city. Odessa is also a Russian city. And we at least have to have various guarantees about what's going to go on in those particular cities and how the Russians are going to be treated, okay, in those cities. Okay, and by the way, Scott, there is some time before Trump actually gets into office and is able to negotiate anything. And the way the Ukrainian front is collapsing now, it's certainly possible that the Russians will take over in Kharkov. Now, they won't have time for a referendum in Kharkov at this point, but their battlefield positions may involve the conquest of Kharkov before Trump actually takes over. Whether they'll have time to get to Odessa and take that over, I don't know. But the front is collapsing right now, and Scott knows that better than almost anybody else.
Borders. Now let's talk about the, what's going to happen with, politically speaking. There will be a treaty signed. Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. The treaty will write in there that, because that's what you wanted, right, Mr. President? You don't want Ukraine to be a member of NATO, correct, Mr. President? We'll go, yeah. He goes, okay. And we want demilitarization. So I'm thinking that we're going to give Ukraine 100,000 troops. That's a fair number to guard their borders. Don't you agree with me, Mr. President? I was thinking 50. No, I'm thinking 100,000 troops, lightly armed. But, they have to have control of their borders. And Putin will go, 100,000? Okay, 100,000. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with what Scott says about that. And I think Putin will agree to a small army of 100,000 for the Ukrainians. There's plenty of historical precedent for that kind of armed force.
Troops is okay. All right. Now we need security guarantees. So, and then you come up with whatever security guarantees you want. And Putin was pretty liberal on them, so let's have that. Man, you could literally, in a day, you could have this thing resolved. Constitutional changes to denazify, meaning that the Banderas will be delegitimized, they become stigmatized. You can no longer celebrate them. And I don't know what you do about Lvov. Maybe there's a fancy little thing that you say, okay, now we're going to hold we're going to form an internet, because the United States needs to get the hell out of Ukraine. So as soon as you get the basic agreements, you go, all right, sign, good. Europe, you guys get to figure out what to do with Western Ukraine. Romania, if you got territory, that's between you Europeans. America's gone. Russia, we made peace. We're going to lift sanctions. Let's move on. And Russia, United States, or the United States exits, he gets the hell out of there.
Okay. That's a very attractive deal for Putin. If they can resolve the Odessa and Kharkov issues, then that would be a very attractive deal to Putin. And depending on the agreement on the security framework, he would really go for that. Now, whether it could be worked out in 3 days, I don't know, but it could be very quick. The outlines could be agreed upon within a day or two. But talking over the fate of Kharkov, okay, and Odessa, that might, take a little more concentration on detail. But I agree with Scott. Trump could be very successful in negotiating that kind of peace with Putin. And if he did it, he'd be a hero. I think a lot of people in this country would attack him. If he were a Democrat and he did that thing, the Republican Party would be talking about sellouts, from here to forever. But Trump, of course, is the Republican president. So if he does it, okay, then the Republicans are going to be split. Okay, and if the Democrats attack him for selling out, Ukraine or stuff like that, I think the Republicans are likely to spring to his support. And from the standpoint, of ordinary Americans, it will seem like a good deal because America's out of it. And we're no longer spending all this money, and we're no longer, I think Trump can sell the idea, and that he can also sell the idea that Putin isn't really the evil dictator we've always thought he was. The Democrats will bleed, of course, and use their propaganda machine and talk about how democratic, Ukraine is. But all that's a lie. And Trump will have greater control over the propaganda mechanisms as president of the United States. And I think within a few months, people will come to think that was a great deal. And Ukraine will go out of the headlines. The Americans will be seen as, getting out of Europe. NATO itself might be close to collapse. Okay, by that time, all of these would be favorable developments and would open the way to other peaceful agreements. And I think the interesting thing about this is that I think Trump can do this with Putin regardless, okay, of what Iran does. If Iran hits Israel in the way I'm suggesting and gets the kind of result I'm suggesting could happen, then I think the Israelis are going to be very hot, okay, to get a peace agreement that ensures the continued existence of Israel. Because then the question will become, can Israel continue to exist? And if Iran says it's interested in ensuring the continued existence of Israel, as long as there's a Palestinian state, and they say they're willing to negotiate that with Trump, then as Trump comes to settle the Ukrainian situation, he can shift over to West Asia And I don't think people are going to be thinking then about the importance of his getting rid of the atomic weapons Iran has, or uh, uh, the missiles Ukraine has, because that kind of negotiation is not going to be on the table. The only thing that's going to be on the table is, will you agree to the continued existence of Israel? And will you, in return, agree to the establishment of a Palestinian state and the end of the genocide? That's going to be the trade-off at that time.
I think that's a great idea.
And an attack by Iran at this point, destroying the air power of Israel, will facilitate that kind of a negotiation going on, though.
That's the easiest solution in the world. And Trump could do it just by taking charge of the negotiation. And you take charge of the negotiation by knowing what the other side wants. Listen to what Putin has been saying and give Putin what he wants. But do it in a way that makes it look like you're in charge. Okay. Boom. Iran. You want a better deal? Let's do a better deal.
Could these mistakes cost you a comfortable retirement? Fisher Investments is sharing 13.
Iran can't have nuclear weapons, can't have nuclear weapons potential. If Iran wants a nuclear enrichment capability, it's going to be tightly controlled by international inspections. International inspections, they'll have, advanced protocols and all this kind of stuff that last forever.
Okay, so if it turns out, that Iran gets those nuclear weapons in just a few days, if they don't already have them, if they get them in the few days that Scott thinks they need, and they start on January 1st, by the time Trump gets into office, they have nuclear weapons. They can announce that they have nuclear weapons. At that point, I think Iran, is in a position to say, we're sorry, Mr. President, we are, a nuclear power now. And we are not giving up our nuclear weapons, our ability to defend ourselves. We have the nuclear weapons. We have the delivery systems, as well. We're not going to negotiate them away. You can stand on your heads. We're perfectly willing to have peaceful relations with you and do business with you. We'll be very happy to do that if you give up on the sanctions. But we're not giving up our capability to defend ourselves. We've seen what happens to nations that do that in agreements with the United States. And we're not going to be one of those nations. And by the way, our allies, China and Russia, are fully in support of us having this particular nuclear capability. And if you decide to try to bomb us into submission, we think they're going to have something to say about that. And they've got hypersonic missiles and also atomic weapons with huge explosive capabilities, and you have no defense against those particular weapons. So we think you had better be careful. In fact, by the time Trump gets into office, I should mention this. Pezeshkian was due to make a trip to Russia on January 25th. That trip has now been moved up to January 17th. The purpose of that trip is to sign the partnership agreement that has taken months and months and months to negotiate between the Iranians, okay, and Russians. It may be that by the time Trump, okay, is inaugurated by January 20th, that agreement will be signed. I think the purpose of moving up the visit from January 25th to January 17th was to present Trump with a fait accompli when he gets into office. And that's going to be a strong alliance between the Russians, okay, and the Iranians. So Trump is going to have to confront them as allies when he gets into office. And I submit that makes the Iranian hand much stronger in any negotiations with Trump. And by the way, Trump is going to be preoccupied with Ukraine when he first gets into office. It's going to take a little while for him to be ready to turn to negotiating with Iran. And who knows what capability the Iranians might have then. If the Russians want to do it, they could give the Iranians the capability. Well, I don't know if they would actually do that. They might consider it to be, too, provocative. But if they delivered a couple of Sarmat missiles to Iran, well,
good ideas.
Right now, Iran doesn't have the capability to deliver ICBMs. They have hypersonic missiles, but no ICBMs. But if Russia were to deliver a few of the Sarmats to them, then they would not be able to easily threaten Iran, with nuclear attack.
There will be no sunset clause and all that. What we agree to lasts forever. In exchange for that, we normalize relations and we lift sanctions. What do you think?
Okay, I don't think that's enough, okay, for Iran, because that doesn't contain any guarantees of the security of Iran against Israel or against the United States itself. So I don't think that's enough for Iran. If I was Iran, I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't even insist on ironclad security guarantees because there are no ironclad security guarantees that would be successful in stopping the United States from attacking Iran if it decided to do so, attacking Iran with nuclear weapons. The only guarantees to stop that are if Iran has a nuclear deterrent, of its own. If Iran is in the same position that North Korea is in. Now, Trump was ready to get and did get very friendly, with North Korea. And he did because he knew North Korea could retaliate, against the United States. If Iran gets into a similar position, he will treat Iran the same way that he's treating, North Korea.
And Iran will go, okay, boom, Korea. Hey, Kim Jong-un, remember me? Come out. You're not going to get denuclearization of Korea. That's not going to happen anymore. What you want now is normalization. Okay, you got to accept that things are what they are. But what you can do is start off with just normalization. So you take away the threat of war, and you get that peace treaty. Get that peace treaty down there, end this war. Then you turn to the north and you say, look, I understand you got good relations with Russia. My new best friend, Vladimir Putin. Oh, by the way, we just did that Ukraine thing. So we're good. So you guys do what you got to do over there. We're not gonna sanction you anymore, but we can't exactly go into full trade relations with you until you're nuclear power, man. So the moment you want to talk about that, let us know. But here's a peace treaty. We're not a threat to you anymore. We're you. Good luck. Good luck with your Russian buddies. They're our buddies too. But but you can't solve that problem overnight. North Korea's got to want to come to the table. They can't be forced to come to the table. And they have to understand the price they have to pay to come to the table, which will be significant denuclearization that leads to zero. But the way you do that is to create a nuclear-free zone in that area, which means now you have to start talking to the Chinese about arms control and all that stuff. It's a separate discussion. But you can stabilize and you could bring down the tension on the North Korean peninsula that quick. You turn to China and you just say, China, I'm going to make this easy.
Okay, the reason why I think that Scott's vision there is not something that can be easily done is because of the agreements that North Korea has now made or is now making with China, and the agreements it has already made, with Russia. What those agreements provide for is the economic development of North Korea. No longer will it be the case that when you fly over North Korea that everything will be dark, because the Russians and the Chinese have big plans for North Korea and how North Korea will fit into the developments around Harbin, China, and around the Russian developments in Siberia. There are giant economic things going on there now, and North Korea is included. So you can damp down the conflict there. You can certainly do that. But having normal trade relations between the North Koreans and the United States may not be that attractive to the North Koreans because they may already have all they can handle with respect to trade relations and economic development agreements with the Chinese and Russians and BRICS. So I don't think you can use normal trade relations with the United States as an incentive for them to significantly denuclearize. Now, I think they will denuclearize by themselves, without any agreements, when they no longer perceive a threat, from the United States. So I think this can happen over a period of time. But I think I may disagree with Scott on how long this is going to take. And I certainly disagree with him on how attractive the proposal of normal trade relations with the United States is going to be for them. Because right now they're focused on the wealth that collaborating with Russia and China can bring to them, in their own area. I think they're just not that much interested in the United States anymore, except to have a situation where they're safe from attack. So I'm not sure that I agree with Scott about that. Now let's move on to what Scott's about to say about China.
It's a one China policy, baby. Hey, Taiwan, you'll never be independent. And our policy right now is to work towards a smooth transition, and so that you are recognized, so the Chinese flag's raised over your country. I'm sorry, that's the way it's going to be. Boom. He just solved 4 major points. He could do that tomorrow, and America will emerge so much stronger. Because could you imagine what the Chinese would be willing to do in terms of trade with the United States if we could solve the Taiwan problem?
How to turn a chilly 50-degree room into a comfortable 73 degrees in 90 seconds. This jet
Could you imagine how effective the economies of Japan and South Korea will be if they aren't worried about gearing up for war? They can just worry about pure economic problems. Russia, the opportunities for investment in Russia once we lift sanctions. I mean, in Iran, the same thing. We why is it that only Chinese companies can go into Iran? Why isn't, if we lift this thing, why can't American companies come into Iran and get involved in the energy extraction business? And suddenly Trump has delivered, he's brought peace, and he's created booming opportunities for America, because if you bring peace, meaningful peace, goodwill follows, and you will see that the United States will be able to come in there with a refined economic approach that isn't linked on us controlling everything. It's pure greed. That's what it should be. I mean, that's what capitalism is about. Go in there, pure greed. Just say, we're not here to tell you how to pray. We're not here to tell you how to do anything. We're just here to make money. 100% make money. Let's make money. I'm not saying that, that's the morally best approach. I'm talking about that's what Trump has promised. And he could very easily deliver on that. And then he can end up doing the stupid things he wants to do. Because I think what Trump's trying to do is bring stability and opportunity in the rest of the world, and then focus on creating Fortress America. And that's where the stupidity of Greenland comes in, and things of that nature.
Okay, so I think Scott, is basically right about that, but I have to raise, another question. And that question is, why is Scott's attitude towards Trump's negotiating with Russia and China different from his attitude with respect to negotiating with North Korea, and Iran? In other words, he wants to give Russia, what Russia wants, and create a peace, on that basis. And I agree, that's a good deal for us, because peace and renewed business is desirable for us. Our policies towards Russia have been stupid, and we have to just stop them and reverse course and develop these new policies. The same is true with respect to our policies with China. They've been about holding on to hegemony and denying the development of the multipolar world. But when Scott turns to Iran, he's suggesting or supporting the idea that Trump do a deal with Iran where he makes Iran give up something in return for peace. Why should he think that it's okay to negotiate with Iran in terms of their giving up some of their defensive capability or all of their defensive capability in return for peace and removing sanctions? Why doesn't he think we should just give Iran what it wants? And the same goes for North Korea. He wants to get something from North Korea. He wants denuclearization, significant with respect to North Korea. But why is North Korea and Iran, why are they different from Russia and China? Well, we know why. It's obvious why. Because Russia and China are very powerful. And Scott thinks we cannot make them give up anything. So we shouldn't be trying to make them give up anything. We should just make peace. I suggest the best course of action is to treat the smaller powers, Iran and North Korea, the same way. We've been as much in error in the way we treat North Korea and Iran as we have been in the way we treat Russia and China. And we should reverse our current policies in exactly the same way. We should make a deal with Iran to normalize relations with them and not demand anything in return. That's what we ought to do. Now, I know that may not be practical because of the influence of the donors, but once again, I come back to this idea. If the Iranians do True Promise 3 and they destroy the Israeli capability, then the Iranians are in a position to trade. And the trade is, look, you make peace with us, you normalize relations with us, you stop the genocide on the part of the Israelis, you and the Israelis agree to a Palestinian state, and we will agree to support the continued existence of Israel and a comprehensive peace agreement. That will be a two-way deal, and in the context of the post-True Promise 3 attack, that will be a very good deal and the best deal Trump can get. And with respect to North Korea, he should just end the sanctions without demanding anything in return. He should go to North Korea, see Kim Jong-un, say, oh, I'm so glad to see you. You and I are friends. What we're going to do now is we're going to end the sanctions immediately. You've had them far too long. We're not going to stand in the way of your development any longer. We're no longer threatening you. You are our buddy, as is South Korea. We're going to support your development and South Korean development, and we're not going to be fighting with you any longer. That's what Trump should do, not even mention denuclearization of North Korea, because denuclearization will naturally happen and won't be important. And when it comes to Iran, he should just admit the errors of the United States in sanctioning Iran for so long. Admit there was no basis for it, that our policies are going to change. We're recognizing the multipolar world. And as part of that particular recognition, we want peace with Iran. We're withdrawing the sanctions. That's what I think should be done. That's the way to bring peace to the world. I agree with Scott. Trump can make 4 peaceful agreements with those powers in a very short time and have wonderful foreign policy victories, the value of which the American people will begin to see when the economy starts booming, as it will when we create these relations and when we start doing business with all of these countries. Okay, now about the Fortress America part of it, that's a whole different set of issues and a whole different set of things to talk about some other time. I'll play the last few minutes of this now. Hey, D, you got anything?
No, I'm just I'm listening to you.
Okay, do you agree?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to keep going then.
But these are smaller issues. He could solve any one of those 4 problems. He could solve all of those 4 problems easily within a year. 4 trips. That's all it takes. I don't know. You fly to Moscow, meet with Putin in Moscow. Moscow Treaty. I don't think he's going to fly to Tehran, but maybe they can meet in a neutral country and sort that problem out. He can go to Pyongyang. He should go to Pyongyang and sort that out. And he should go to Beijing and sort out Taiwan. 4 trips. Because these aren't complicated problems. These are simple problems. We complicate them by trying to hold on to, this notion of American hegemony. But it just weakens us. It weakens us. We need to re-gear so that our primary means of interfacing with the world is economic, not military. And we actually have the economic potential to do well there. We slit our own throats with these sanctions policies and this, weaponizing the dollar. The best way to weaponize the dollar is to make the dollar relevant. You want to control the world? Make the dollar the irreplaceable currency. Make the dollar the most convenient currency in the world to use. And you link that to an expansive American economic engagement. Suddenly, America is the major power, and we don't have to beat up anybody to do it. Trump could do this if he wanted to do it.
I treated myself to a wild Alaskan company membership, and my only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. Every month, I get a box of
We'll see.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the problem is Israel and its nuclear bombs.
Screw Israel. Israel's not a problem. How is Israel a problem?
Because they have threatened to use their bombs against.
They're not going to use their bomb. Israel's not going to use their bomb.
Because Iranians.
Israel wants to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. That's the path of survival. Israel wants to sell its gas to Turkey. That's the path of survival. The bomb is going to become irrelevant, especially if Trump can negotiate away the Iranian nuclear program. The Israeli bomb it becomes an inconvenience to the Israelis. It's an impediment. It's a problem for Israel to resolve itself. But what you don't want to do is give the bomb relevance. And you give the bomb relevance by weaponizing Iran, by not solving that problem. But Israel, at the end of the day, if we depoliticize Middle East conflict, what leverage does Israel have? If Israel is just another nation out there trying to make a buck or make a shekel, suddenly Israel's in trouble, to be honest. Because if Israel's whole reason to exist becomes their ability to compete fairly, I tell you what, the Chinese can swamp the Israeli economy like that. So, the only thing that gives Israel relevance is this perpetual warfare. This ability for Israel to say, we are the super Jews, we are the Zionists, we must fight and struggle, of course, with America backing this up. The best way to defang Israel is to take the conflict out of the Middle East. Look, Palestine is a self-solving problem. They solved it themselves. There is no more Palestinian issue. I mean, it's tragic. I'm not saying this, but I tried to tell. Don't cheer the demise of Assad because that's the end of Palestine. They cheered, they're gone. It's in our hearts. Okay, good. I'm glad it's in your hearts for 60 years. But nobody cares. Once people start making money, you understand that nobody cares about Palestine. That's just the tragic truth. It doesn't live in the hearts of the world. It lives in the hearts of people, but lives in the hearts of who? Hamas, Fatah, the Palestinian Authority. I mean, which Palestinians define Palestine? Which Palestinians are we talking about? The diaspora or the people in Gaza? We're talking about the Palestinians who live in South Florida. Are they more important and their opinions more important than the Palestinians dying in Gaza? How about the Palestinians in Jenin that have said we're rising up to defend Palestine, but they're being put down by the Palestinians, in Ramallah, who are coming in from the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen? Which Palestinians are we talking about? That's one of the problems. The Palestinians don't know who the hell they are. Israel, I think, is a self-solving problem. Unfortunately, the way I would have liked to see it solved is have Zionism go away and Israel go away. That's not going to happen right now unless something dramatic changes. Trump and Netanyahu tragically are the perfect Zionist team. So I think Zionism has won for the time. And And the only way Zionists get defeated if you get a united front. But if all the Arab world is willing to sell their soul to be part of this greater Israel project, which they all apparently are prepared to do, if Iran is willing to, allow the axis of resistance to be diminished because they're looking for a better economic future, then there's no hope for Palestine. And so then Israel just becomes another nation in the Middle East that now has to be defined by something other than war and conflict. It'll have to be defined by the economy. And as good as Israel is, its economy is never going to be an earth. Okay, the Israeli economy will never have the impact on the global geopolitics as the Saudi Arabian oil economy. Just isn't going to happen. So Israel sort of now the problem gets downsized because now we're just talking about Israel, a nation with an economy that's trying to work with other nations that have economy. It becomes an economic issue. And Israel's economy is never going to be as dominant as Israel is by using conflict to make itself relevant, which is what it's doing now.
Okay. So that's it. So D.
Hello. The one thing I was going to say with Iran too is the supreme leader. He's from what people have been talking about, they're worried about his health.
Yes, they are worried about his health. Okay, but when he comes out and speaks, he still seems strong.
Oh, he did definitely.
And his mind seems to be all there.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be a problem of that kind. So certainly for the short run, he can still be a very good leader for them.
Yes. And they're talking about his successor and all that, just to have everything in line.
Yes, they are. But what did you think of those last comments from Scott?
What, you want to repeat that again, his last comments?
Okay, the last comments actually related to the problem of the Israeli bomb.
Oh, yeah.
And Scott's saying, well, that problem goes away if there's peace. Okay, and Israel becomes, another nation, competing economically. The relevance of its bomb, goes away. It's not important anymore.
They like to show their strength in the region, their muscle power.
Okay, but if we put this into the context of the Iranian attack that we talked about before and the destruction of their air power and negotiations following that continue to affirm the existence of an Israeli state and also create a Palestinian state alongside the Israeli state. Then Israel is in a different situation because their air capability has been destroyed. And they've been forced to actually come to terms with Palestinian self-determination.
Well, that's what's going to have to be done. They have to be forced into it. They have to be weakened.
But if they're forced into it and they have to give up the genocide, and live like a normal nation, then what happens to their bomb? Is Scott right that then it falls into basically irrelevance?
Yeah.
I think that might well happen if the Iranians have also developed some bombs.
Yeah, the Iran has to have protection for itself.
Yes, it has to have its own bombs. Okay, but if it has its bombs and its missile capabilities, and there's that kind of peace agreement, then that sets Israel on the path of normalizing relations with the Saudis, okay, and the Arabs, and going ahead with economic projects inside of Israel that might be important, okay, for Israel.
The one thing element in Israel that is a problem is the far right with their Greater Israel. They are a problem.
Right, but if the Iranian attack chases out, another 2 million of them,
Well, that's what would have to happen. They're just nuts, and they've got the Christian Zionists behind them. So I mean, it's just this group of nuts.
so the future really depends on whether the Iranians go ahead with True Promise 3 and whether it destroys the air power, okay, of Israel,
Hmm.
therefore forces a retreat from Syria and forces the Israelis to come to the table and agree to a Palestinian state.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to be forced to the table.
Okay, but if the Iranians don't do True Promise 3,
That's it. I mean, it's just I just see problems with the whole thing. They're showing weakness. It's just I just don't like how the U.S. I mean, the U.S. You have people in the U.S. and the right wing and the government pushing uh, to attack Iran. You hear Lindsey Graham and a whole bunch of them wanting to bomb Iran.
yes. Yes, indeed.
And that whole concept of bombing Iran has to be taken off the table. Iran's got to show its muscle.
Yes. Okay, so why is it that nobody agrees with us?
The people on the ground, you hear the people communicating that, um, in Iran and just, in Gaza and Palestine, they just feel so alienated. People, everyone, like in the region, they know the power that Iran has. And why isn't Iran? Why aren't they?
Yes.
That's the big question. Why aren't they? Because I don't see it looking good at all if Iran doesn't act.
Yes, and I don't see it looking good at all either if they don't act. I think they have to act and they have to be successful. That they really have to hit them with, 2,000 missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And in concert also with Hezbollah and the Houthis, okay, and the Iraqi resistance.
Yes.
They have to create utter chaos, okay, in Israel in order to get the Israelis to come to the table.
Because the other hand is the fact that with Trump coming in, if nothing's done, then you have Israel continuing what they're doing, like with Syria and everywhere else. They're going to see it. Then if the U.S. gets involved, with Iran and you have all that going on, it just things can turn over and look completely different in the Middle East.
They can turn over and look completely different if the Iranians do True Promise 3, and it has the effect that it can possibly have.
Exactly, because if they don't, we just don't know. We don't know. What I do feel is the fact that CIA and a lot of them are waiting to see with the Supreme Leader with his health. He's old and his health. They're watching on that. They're going to wait for just the right, I mean, I hate to say the right moment, but a weakened moment. And Iran's got to take that off the table.
Yes, I agree. Iran's got to take that off the table. And what they have to do is they have to secure the Palestinian state now.
Yes.
I think. And they have to do, really whatever it takes. I think they have the capability to do it. They have to be courageous enough to use that capability right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Because once Trump gets in, yeah,
but I'd like to know what some of the military experts actually think. I'd like to know in particular, whether uh, Dan Davis and Doug McGregor and Scott uh, uh, think that Iran has the capability to destroy all of the Israeli air bases, okay, in a very strong missile attack in the framework of True Promise 3. Because I think that point, okay, is vital. They have to be able to stop those Israeli planes from flying.
mm-hmm, exactly. I mean, this has been going on for too long.
It's been going on for too long, but that's what's supporting the genocide. From a military point of view, it's the Israeli air power that's supporting the genocide.
And it's got to be
Okay,
stopped.
to summarize, we disagree with Scott's view. I think we generally agree with Doug's analysis that Israel probably won't be sitting back, that they'll be looking to attack Iran before Trump comes into office, so as to drag him into the war on the side of the Israelis right now, and not give him a chance to negotiate, because they can't count on what he'll produce if he gets into a negotiation with Iran. So that's one reason why they're going to want to start a war now. The next 24 days or 23 days are going to be crucial, and we have to see what's going to happen. So I think we align more closely with Colonel McGregor's analysis of the situation as opposed to Scott's analysis of the situation. But we like some of the ideas Scott has about, making peace and what Trump can do to make peace. And we disagree with Scott's analysis about the capability of Iran to turn things around with True Promise 3.
Right, because it months ago, everybody was talking about that.
Yeah, I know. And all of a sudden they stopped because of Syria. But it's not clear why Syria should have that effect, why it affects True Promise 3.
I know.
I don't understand that. In other words, True Promise 3 was not dependent on Bashar Assad's control of Syria.
No, it wasn't.
I mean, it had nothing to do with that. So why does that change the situation? So moving to the comments, we have Steve Wolfbrand says NATO is no longer needed. Russia will not invade Europe. Why would they? Solana Dell says, geez, what an awful statement, Scott. I realize he's just being honest. But no one cares about you is pretty blunt. I couldn't agree more. And Steve Wolfman says, much will change shortly in 2025. Trump will run some deals. I agree. But the kinds of deals will depend upon the power situation that Trump is confronted with. And it's up to Iran to confront him with a power situation that's favorable but to the axis of resistance. Evelina asks, do you have information on Tartus? Because there is a rumor, Brit, Hindi, alternative media, that Israel may have used a small nuke to bomb a location there based on radiation measurements picked up by Cyprus and other sources. Okay, earlier in the stream, I talked about the possibility of them using a small nuke there. But I don't have any more information on it than you stated just now. And Evelina says, isn't there an Alawite community there? Yes. Evelina says, okay, you just answered my question. Yeah. Evelina says, thanks, Les. It's getting late. I'm going to sign out here pretty soon. Yes, it is getting late, and we are going to sign out soon too, but I have actually two announcements to make. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my meeting Bonnie. It's the 59th anniversary. Okay.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
So we are going out to celebrate tomorrow. And then the second announcement is as of now, I am planning to take a break from streams. I think the break will be at least 2 weeks long. Okay. I have some business to do. And the streams, even though they're only 3 a week, they're too all consuming. I'm always working to prepare the streams. And for at least 2 weeks, okay, I have to be free to take care of the business that I have to take care of. So I probably won't be back for 2 weeks, but if anything happens, if anything vital happens, of course, I will suddenly be back. Okay. Also, my business may take more than 2 weeks to do, but I don't think it will do. But it's possible it will take 3 or 4 weeks also. So I may be taking quite a break. I'll come back though as soon as I can because, as you know, I love these particular streams. I'm also glad to see that our attendance was a little up tonight. At the start of the stream, we only had about 8 people, but we're up to 33 now, which is nowhere near as low as 8. So that's very good. Even when it says happy anniversary, we'll miss you those 2 weeks. Well, hopefully I'll get my business done in quicker time than that. And as soon as I get it done, I will certainly be back.
That sounds good. And you can always join me when I get my shows going again.
Yes, I can. And I may just, join you from time to time anyway, because if you're preparing the show, I won't have to prepare the show. I can
Exactly.
come in and give some comments. So it's the preparation that takes all the time.
Yeah, it's true.
So thank you, Dee, for being here tonight. And Lana says, were you successful with your web addresses? I haven't been successful yet, and that's why I have to do some work over the next 2 weeks. I have some marketing to do, okay, with respect to those, and the marketing is going to take some time. So that's what this is about.
Okay.
So, Dee, thank you very much for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me, and have a good time tomorrow night.
Okay, it was a pleasure. It'll be tomorrow brunch, actually.
Oh, brunch. Have a great brunch.
Okay. And Evelina asked, when will these shows start again?
I'm not too sure, but they will be starting soon.
Okay, great.
Basically next week, or I have to see with Madeline if she's up to tomorrow night or not.
Okay. Yeah, because as you said, she's been sick.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Lana says, hope you and Bonnie have a great time. Thank you, Lana. We fully intend to have a great time. We carefully researched to go place a place to go out to. It looks fascinating, so we're very enthusiastic about that.
Oh, that's good. That should be nice.
Yes, it should be really nice. So everybody have a wonderful 2 weeks, and hopefully I'll be back well before then, and hopefully it won't take any longer than 2 weeks.
Yes.
So be well, everybody. Okay. In the meantime, and good luck to us all in relation to getting through the next 24 days without having a wider war, a wider regional war uh, in Western Asia, on our hands. I don't think we want that.
No, we don't.
Yes. And Lana says, have a happy and healthy new year. Yes. And everyone, of course, have a happy and healthy new year. We're also looking forward to that because we'll do a little celebration on New Year's Eve as well.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah, but usually we do that at home and it's very quiet.
Mm-hmm. It sounds nice.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Bonnie.
And again, good luck, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
And good night and Happy New Year to you, Dee.
Okay.
Oh, I gotta end the stream first. I can't not end the stream.